The Mafia games have always been special and different from other crime-based open-world games. They focus on a much more mature story and are generally a lot darker than GTA titles, for example. They often get compared to GTA due to their obvious similarities, and of course because GTA practically invented, or at the very least revolutionized, the genre. But they are not the same, nor are Mafia games clones. Well, at least not the first two. Mafia 3 has been massacred and turned into a GTA clone due to sheer incompetence of Hangar 13. They have been heavily influenced by vintage gangster movies from the 30s all the way up to The Godfather, Scarface and Goodfellas. And these influences can be felt every time you play, even when you just roam around the open world. Mafia 2 is unique and has been very influential within the genre, even though the franchise never took off the same way GTA did. People always compare them, and Mafia is often called a clone or knockoff, even though this couldn't be further from the truth. The game puts the story first and has always had a lot more depth. The open world here is more like a movie set. It's open and full of details, but it serves as a secondary character and activities in it are limited. What's amazing about Mafia 2 is that it doesn't force you to spend dozens of hours grinding the open world or searching for collectibles like it has become standard with a lot of current games. Sure, it has collectibles in the form of some very interesting magazines that will definitely motivate you to search for them, but there's no urgency. The whole game is very relaxed in general. Each chapter starts with some story relevant information, and you always have a marker on the map telling you where you have to go next to progress. But if you don't feel like doing a mission, you don't have to. There are no invisible walls or warnings if you just decide to go and explore the world. Parts of the story take place during the winter and in the 1940s. This is reflected in how the city looks and how the pedestrians behave. It's colder during the winter, so the streets will be shiny from the ice and full of snow. Some pedestrians will be falling due to the streets being slippery, and others will walk around breathing warm air into their hands, clearly freezing. You can also see how the people look slightly different from those in the 1950s, as there's plenty of men in uniform walking around due to World War II and the fashion being somewhat different. This is noticeable in the cars too, as they will look more old school and the radio stations will only play period accurate music. If you let your car stand outside for too long, or if you happen to find cars that haven't been used for a while, the snow will cover them, and once you start driving, it will slowly start melting or being blown away by the wind. These are just a handful of details. There are actually thousands of small things that make Empire Bay feel alive and are just nice gameplay features. Like the fact that from time to time you will have to visit gas stations to fill up your car, as the gas is limited like in real life. In these gas stations you even get to choose between the type of gas you want. This might not make a big difference, but it makes the world feel more believable and alive. A lot of the stores and interiors are destroyable, and simply shooting someplace up is a lot of fun and can be really immersive when role-playing a gangster from the golden age. The city is full of details and looks beautiful, especially in the winter time. Winter in this game is my favorite time, and I love playing the early parts of the game during Christmas season because it's so fitting and atmospheric. That's one of the areas Mafia 2 exceeds the most: atmosphere. It might not be the prettiest game ever or have unique and mind-blowing art direction, but it has an atmosphere that few other games have. That's why I often avoid going to missions, despite the story and the missions being really good and fun. I love roaming around this world, causing chaos, robbing stores, stealing these vintage cars, and of course collecting Playboy magazines. Sure, it's repetitive and not something you will be doing for hours on end like in a GTA game, but that's fine. Sometimes it's great to play a game that doesn't annoy you with constant useless collectibles and side quests. Mafia 2 has no side missions at all, and it doesn't feel like you're missing out on something. It has a clear story with clear objectives and a linear mission design. Empire Bay itself does feel like a real city and lived in, even though it has a limited number of NPCs and cars on the streets. But I never felt like that was immersion breaking or hurt the game. Each neighborhood has its own unique style, style and vibe, and none of them feel copy and pasted. When you're exploring downtown, you'll see different types of people and buildings as opposed to the poorer neighborhoods. What I also loved is how some of the non-enterable stores have detailed 3D storefronts where the developers actually went the length and filled the space with actual models rather than use some 2D textures. That reminded me of LA Noire, which also had an insane level of details, be it in interiors or outside in the open world. This is one of those things that developers don't have to do because most players won't notice or see it anyway. But it's amazing when they include such details because when you actually do notice, you feel a lot more immersed in the world and a bigger sense of respect for the hard extra work that must have gone into this. It's sad that the Mafia games have never received the attention and recognition they deserve, at least the first two games, because the third one is a disaster. I feel like it's insulting to the franchise when some people or even journalists call these games GTA clones because they never try to imitate the GTA series, and both of them have completely different goals and what type of story they are trying to tell, what type of game they are trying to be. What I love about Mafia 2 is that the characters are all bad people. These are mob members whose only motivation to do anything is money, women, and supposed respect, which is a made-up lie anyway. The game does glorify the Mafia the same way most other media does, but it also goes to greater lengths to actually deconstruct certain Mafia myths and show how evil and backstabbing this world can be. Vito is not a hero or a good guy. He's a real scumbag and a cold-blooded criminal. Sure, he does have a certain sense of honor and morality, especially when it comes to his family and friends, but as the game progresses, even that starts to crumble. And that's a good thing. Too many games or movies that feature the Mafia or have a Mafia protagonist put rose-colored glasses on the player's face and act as if the character is actually a good guy deep down and that his evil doings should be forgiven or overlooked in favor of him being sympathetic or well-written. Vito is relatable, well-written and sympathetic, but he's clearly a bad guy. A big difference to the quieter and more calm-natured Tommy Angelo from the first game. Tommy didn't even want to be a criminal, he declined the offer because he knew the risk and mental issues that world and lifestyle brings with it. The only reason he joined was because he had no other choice. Vito, on the other hand, has a very limited morality system and has always been drawn to gangsters in the underworld. People keep saying that Mafia 1 has a very Goodfellas-like story, but I believe that Vito has much more in common with the character of Henry Hill than Tommy.
Right now I'm living off the $20 the state gives me every week.
I know lots of people who pay well for a risky job, so to speak. I'm sure I can line something up for my oldest friend. The working man's a sucker, that's for damn sure.
You said it.
Vito has always wanted to be a gangster. He actively seeks that world out and didn't hesitate for a second when Joe started offering him mob-related jobs after coming back from the war. A war he had to join in the first place due to being caught stealing jewelry. Later in prison, Vito savagely ambushes an enemy and cuts her throat without a second thought or any sense of regret. He enjoyed it and wanted to do it because that's what's giving him thrills and adrenaline. The same thing can be said about his friends and all other people he surrounds himself with, except for his mother and sister, even though he wasn't even able to hide his dark side in front of his sister and pretty much pushed her away from him. And that's a good thing. It's great to be able to play a scumbag character without the game getting too preachy or satirical about it. Mafia 2 does its best to portray the Mafia from a more realistic point. Sure, there is some level of glorification going on, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But the main theme of this game is how the Mafia lures you in with false promises and shiny objects, only to then drag you into a world that is mentally draining and backstabbing. It's a world where your best friend can be the same person that will kill or torture you because that's just how things work. Some people complain about the ending, but I think it was perfect. Mafia has always tried to be more realistic, and that ending is a lot closer to reality than an ending where Vito and Joe both managed to get away.